A woman is found dead at her husband's condo in Chicago, and police are investigating as Caitlyn Tracey's parents go to court to claim her remains. I lay out the details of this sad case and why Tracey's parents are taking on her husband. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Caitlyn Tracey was just 36 years old when she was found dead on October 27th at the condo where her husband lived in Chicago. Chicago police are investigating Caitlyn Tracey's death, and they're not saying anything about where the case stands. Caitlyn Tracey's cause and manner of death have not yet been released, and no one has been charged in her death. But Caitlyn's parents claim in court documents that she was being abused by her husband, Adam Beckerink, and they say Beckerink was detained, questioned, and then released after Caitlyn's body was found. Beckerink lived in Chicago, and the couple, according to the court documents, married this past April. But Caitlyn Tracey's parents were not at the ceremony, and Caitlyn was actually still living in Michigan. On October 27th, Caitlyn's body was found at the condo building. Details provided in court documents are graphic. An affidavit from Caitlyn Tracey's parents states, decedent's remains were discovered directly below the respondent's condominium. Law enforcement has advised the family that based on the condition of the remains, decedent's body fell approximately 24 floors before landing at the bottom of a stairwell. Based on the height of the fall, decedent's body was pulverized and her foot was severed from her body. Law enforcement has advised the family that the respondent is the primary suspect, and he was immediately taken into custody by the Chicago Police Department Violent Crimes Unit. Law enforcement has advised the family that the respondent was detained for 48 hours and then was released without being charged. Now, court documents filed by Caitlyn Tracey's parents say she was living in Michigan at the time that she died, but her husband was living in that condo in Chicago where he worked as a lawyer. The documents continue. Caitlyn obtained a restraining order against Beckerink in Cook County, Illinois in October 2023. In 2024, Beckerink was arrested twice in New Buffalo for domestic violence against Caitlyn. The court documents include part of the petition for a restraining order that Caitlyn Tracey filed in 2023. She described Beckerink calling her a cheater and a liar, among other things. The document states, the respondent physically abused me by dragging me by my ankle, strangling me, suffocating me, slamming my head against a cabinet, slapping me, punching me, putting my head on a headlock and dragging me away from the front door to prevent me from leaving. The respondent took my keys, wallet, iPad, and phone from me to prevent me from seeking help. I was able to flee on foot. I went to the police station and filed a police report for aggravated domestic battery. Now, it's not clear what happened to that charge, but the documents filed by Caitlyn Tracey's parents to support their effort to claim her remains say she later withdrew the request for the restraining order. The request for a restraining order also includes other details about an alleged incident in July of 2023 in Michigan. Caitlyn Tracey wrote, the respondent physically abused me by throwing a pickle jar, which struck me on my head, punching me, pushing me, pulling my hair, dragging me by my clothes, and stripping me out of my clothes. The respondent also poured vodka on my body, which burned my wounds, and would motion as if he was going to hit me with the alcohol bottle. The next day, Tracey wrote, the respondent took me to the hospital to seek medical attention for my open head wound. Now, because of the history of alleged abuse and what Caitlyn Tracey's parents say law enforcement told them, they asked a judge in Cook County to order that her remains be released to them and not Adam Beckerink. The Traceys wrote that they wanted to give their daughter a proper burial in the Catholic Church. An attorney representing Caitlyn Tracey's parents said in an affidavit that he asked Adam Beckerink's lawyers about releasing her remains to her parents. The Tracey's lawyer said in an affidavit, Chelsea, the attorney representing Adam Beckerink, advised me that Beckerink wished to have Caitlyn's remains cremated and that he intended to keep possession of her ashes after her funeral. It continues, Chelsea and I discussed the matter further, and I again requested that Beckerink agree to release Caitlyn's remains to her family. The final answer was no, according to an email in the documents. Last week, a judge in Cook County, Illinois, agreed to release Caitlyn Tracey's remains to her parents. Their attorney, Andrew Cuniff, said in a statement, today's hearing marked a significant step for Caitlyn's family, and we are grateful to the courts for their sound and swift rulings, both in Michigan and Chicago. We are also grateful to the family's Michigan attorney, Mitt Drew, for his hard work and dedication. Finally, the Tracey family can close this chapter and focus on mourning Caitlyn's loss and celebrating her remarkable life. Caitlyn was an incredible young woman who was taken far too soon. We hope that her story may shine a light on the often hidden tragedy of domestic abuse. The death of Caitlyn Tracey and the alleged abuse she suffered is tragic. It's a reminder of how important it is to check out the people who are in your life. Truthfinder.com is a website that can help you do that. It scours public records for things like criminal and traffic records. In fact, it's one of the largest public records search services out there. Just log on to truthfinder.com and put in a person's name. You'll get things like past and current addresses, social media accounts, possible relatives, phone numbers, and the sex offenders who live in your neighborhood. You should try it. I have a great deal for you. You can get 50% off of confidential background reports. Just log on to www.truthfinder.com/LCCrimeFix and start accessing information about almost anyone. I want to bring in Krista Ramey. She's a trial attorney who represents victims of abuse and survivors of abuse. Your thoughts, Krista, on the parents of Caitlyn Tracey having to go to court to say, we want to claim our daughter's remains?
Thank God they did. And I think that they really had some great legal advice and were able to get her remains back. A couple of things just initially, just being Catholic, he was saying that he wanted to cremate her remains and keep them privately. Well, in the Catholic faith, it's ashes to ashes, and there's a requirement to be buried. And so when you're looking at Michigan law, which although he lived in Illinois and that's where her body was, Michigan law was the prevailing law because that's where her permanent residence was. And that it's a rebuttable presumption that the spouse gets the remains. And it is rebutted by the fact of, someone not having, moral character or being able to handle the remains appropriately or being dishonest. And so this is how the parents got in there and were able to use their daughter's own words as, an assistance in that, which is just incredible and sad, all at the same time. But I'm glad that the parents made this fight. I'm glad that they were able to get their daughter's remains so that they can at least have that portion of their grieving, to be able to move forward with that.
The fact that he wanted to cremate her remains, to me, it just seems like a big red flag, given the allegations here that he was abusive toward her. Nothing to this point, it appears, has been proven in a court of law. He has not been charged in her death. The investigation is still underway. We don't have a cause and manner of death yet. The parents claim they've been told he is the prime suspect in her death. So just the fact that he wanted to cremate those remains is very suspect to me.
Yeah, it just kind of it continues that sense of control that narcissistic, abusive men, or in some cases women, have over their victims. And it's that level of control that he wanted to continue to have over her even after death. And, the allegations of abuse are pretty horrific before her death. And where he would, cause her, cuts by throwing jars at her and then pouring vodka on them to, make the pain worse. And physically assaulting her, raping her. It makes sense that he would continue this control and abuse, after her life has ended. So it is very creepy, if you will, and but not surprising.
One of the things that struck me was the fact that her parents said that they didn't even know if they were legally married. They weren't at the ceremony for the wedding in April. The mother in her affidavit, in the joint affidavit with her husband, said, we were isolated from our daughter. She was kept away from us. So there are all of these flags, these red flags about abuse. And we see in October, she's filing for a restraining order in which she says he's her ex-boyfriend. Okay. And then by April of this year, they're married, but they're living apart. So, there's often this abusive incident. There's a honeymoon period. and then there will be another incident of abuse. So it's this vicious cycle that takes place. And it seems from the paperwork, at least, that we've been presented with, that may have been what was happening here.
Yeah. So it was last year, October, when she filed for that restraining order, and then supposedly married him this year in April, in a private ceremony where no one was present. And I don't believe that he has presented any evidence that they were in fact married to anyone yet. So that's the question mark. But it's that cycle that you're talking about is very common with abuse. It's that I can't believe I did that to you. I'm so sorry. God, please forgive me. And then you get the showering of gifts and the apologies and a brief period of time where the relationship looks good and you're hopeful that your love can change that man. I think it's kind of like I akin it to all of the Disney movies that we watch when we're kids. We're taught kind of at an early age as a young woman that our love can change the abuser. So if we love that beast, he'll turn into a prince. If he kissed that frog, he'll turn into a prince. And the fact is that her love could not have changed him. He was a narcissistic psychopath. And that looks like it continued to play out all the way until her death.
Police are still investigating, of course, but the description of how Caitlyn's body was found in a stairwell on the lower level, somebody discovered her body and her foot. I mean, they state in the police report, I'm looking at it right now, there was a severed foot in the stairwell and they were unsure to determine if it was real. And then they located the rest of the body. There were blood stains. I mean, it's a really grisly, gruesome scene. You would have to think in a high-rise condo building in Chicago that there would be surveillance cameras in these areas. We don't know that. But the police are obviously investigating this. They questioned Adam Beckerink, we're told, for an amount of time. He was detained, according to the parents, for 48 hours. I mean, there's got to be something going on here with this police investigation. They call it ongoing, of course.
Yeah, we were talking about, I don't really understand, that mechanics of falling down 24 flights of stairs. Clearly, that is not the case because 24 flights, you have to go around landing. So this is going probably down that area between the stairs as you're going down that spiral. And that seems to me to be a push or throwing someone over. And, I guess the idea is, how did that happen? And the police have to, tie that up. Was it self-inflicted? Did he do it? I guess is the idea. But, the severed foot is what really gets me. I don't know that the foot could be severed on the way down. And when you use the word severed, that seems like a deliberate act, like a cutting, a dismembering of the foot. And so, there was a lot of allegations in the past that were made by her where she would have to leave on foot to get to the police because he would take her iPhone and her iPad and her other ways of communicating, her car keys. And so I wonder if that was symbolic in some way as a part of not allowing her to leave by severing her foot. That's just a supposition on my part, but it tracks for me.
And it definitely says that the foot was severed and that she was laying at the bottom of the stairwell, face down. There was a lot of blood and that she was missing a foot. So it is very suspect and it's very disturbing. This investigation, I think we'll learn more shortly. I'm assuming police are dotting all of their I's and crossing their T's. They may have to wait for toxicology results and to really form, the medical examiner is going to have to come up with a cause and manner of death and finalize all of that, possibly before they come to any type of conclusion. That they're not calling this a homicide just yet.
Yeah, the only other option would be suicide. This cannot be called this cannot be called natural causes. Yes, it could be called an accident for sure. But I think that there is a strong presumption here that he's going to be charged ultimately, just because of the history that the two of them had, and the domestic violence charges that were pending against him, and in Michigan, I believe. And then you have, where she was found, and in the manner in which she was found. So I think that there is a presumption that, at least in my mind, that he will be charged. But you have to have all of those things in order to present a case, either by information or to a grand jury. So you do have to complete that investigation first. There are times where you will see an arrest made immediately, but that is when there is, probable cause that there was a murder, that it was a homicide, and that this person was the person that did it. So here, because you have multiple other options for cause and manner of death, that you have him free. The police are definitely keeping their eye on him, and I suspect that he is the prime suspect in what they're thinking right now is probably a homicide.
It certainly looks that way, and we will keep an eye on it. Krista Ramey, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, anytime.
Caitlyn Tracey's family remembered her in her obituary, calling her a force of nature, vibrant and bold, and always ready to make you laugh until your sides hurt. They said she lit up a room, loved to travel, and had an eye for fashion and design. She had a business degree in hospitality management, but had switched careers working in data analytics. She was loved dearly by her family. And again, I want to say that I reached out to the attorneys representing Adam Beckerink. At the time of this recording, they have not responded. That's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.